UFC Fight Night Vegas 74, Cara France versus Albazi takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main events, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Maxim Grishin versus Philipe Lins. I am going to be going with Maxim Grishin here. I think he has a lot more experience at a high level. He's fought some pretty good opponents in the UFC as well. Big dude for the division as well. Good reach for the division too. Same with Philipe Lins. In fact, Philipe Lins failed a few times making this weight class before. He had a bunch of fights cancelled between 2021 and 2022. Just couldn't get a matchup pretty much. Managed to beat William Knight. This is Maxim Grishin, by the way, but he's had a bunch of fights cancelled as well. But Philipe Lins has had a bunch of fights cancelled, like a ton of them, over and over and over again. But he did beat Prachnio, and he did beat OSP. Don't know how much I'm rating a win over OSP at this point. I do like Maxim Grishin's performance against Dustin Jacoby, because he arguably should have won that one, but because he missed weight, I feel like they just weren't going to be generous with the decision towards him. But that's a very good light heavyweight, so I do think at light heavyweight, Maxim Grishin is going to have the experience advantage. Not to mention, he's not worn. Like, he is 39 years of age, but he's not completely over the hill yet. Like, he's still kind of got it in his game. And Philipe Lins is 37, so I'm going to go with the experience advantage of Maxim Grishin. He's fought at high-level promotions. He was fighting in the PFL and not popping for PEDs in the PFL, Philipe Lins, like you were. But Maxim Grishin, I reckon he's got this one done. I do. I think he's very experienced. He's fought the best. He fought Ankalaev. He's fought Tybura, Jacoby, Antigua. I think he'll beat him. I think he'll beat Philipe Lins by decision. We move on. Luan Lacerda versus Damon Blackshear. This is a great matchup, and I'm looking forward to it. A weird matchup to try and predict, though, I will be honest. A very strange matchup to try and predict. But I am going to lean towards Lacerda, because he did okay against Cody Stamann. He didn't have the best of performances, but Cody Stamann is a really tough debut to have. You know what I'm saying? He's a tricky veteran. He'll throw a couple of tricks out there on you. Now, Damon Blackshear did have a pretty close fight with Farid Basharat, went to a draw with Yusuf Zalal, but I think Luan Lacerda is a little bit more talented, had a bunch of momentum coming into the UFC, but then, of course, took the fight against Stamann in his debut and lost a decision. It wasn't like a crazy bad performance from him in that fight, but I just think Cody Stamann, again, is just a really tough matchup to draw in your debut. So Farid Basharat's good, but I think Javid is a lot better than Farid Basharat. A lot better than Farid Basharat. And Damon Blackshear was making, like, big mistakes in that matchup as well. And Luan Lacerda is pretty decent. You know what I mean? He had a pretty competitive fight with Cody Stamann. Kept up pretty much every round, but Cody Stamann was just doing a little bit more than him. He got the takedown on Cody Stamann as well. So if there's anyone going to mix it up and go to the grappling, I think it's going to be Luan Lacerda in this matchup. And I'm going to pick him over Damon Blackshear, although this is dangerous. And there's not a bad chance that the underdog of Blackshear gets this one done by finish. But I am going to go with Lacerda. We move on. Up the card, Jinh Frey versus Elise Reed. This is a no-brainer. I'm going with Elise Reed. I think she's much better than Jinh Frey. Jinh Frey should not be in the UFC. Now, again, neither should Elise Reed. So I'm not going to use that to determine the fight. But at the end of the day, Jinh Frey is 38 years of age as a female. And she is in good shape, and she is an athlete, I understand. But she's coming off a KO loss. And she's been out for 7 months after that KO loss. And before that, she lost to Vanessa Demopoulos. Now, Vanessa Demopoulos is awful at fighting. She's really, really bad at fighting. It's actually embarrassing how terrible she is. And I know that Jinh Frey should have won that fight, because I watched it again. She should have won. It was a robbery. But you shouldn't even be making it close. Now, Elise Reed has lost some fights. She got out-grappled by Sam Hughes. She got completely out-strengthed and outmanned, let's be real, by Ciara Eubanks. And she also lost to Luma Lookboom. But it's Luma Lookboom. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to take too much away from her there. Luma Lookboom's a great striker, working on her grappling, starting that part of her game as well. I don't see Jinh Frey taking this one to the ground. And on the feet, I think Elise Reed is just going to be able to outbox her for the distance of the fight, to be honest with you. I think that's going to be a problem on the feet for Jinh Frey. I don't see her having the grappling ability able to get Elise Reed to the ground. So, yeah. Got to go with Elise Reed in the odds that this is a stand-up fight. And Corey McKenna's not bad, and she has good takedowns herself. And Elise Reed beat her pretty clearly. I don't know how that was a split decision. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Daniel Santos versus Johnny Munoz Jr. The rebirth of Oliveira. 1 week before the real Oliveira returns, we have his first evolution Pokemon, Daniel Santos, making his return after his fight with John Castaneda now. The fight with John Castaneda, he took a lot of damage. He took a lot of damage in that fight, but he has had a bit of time off since then. You know, he hasn't fought since October of last year. He took 8 months off, so I'm liking that. And in his debut, he got Julio Arce. Some of these debuts these guys are getting recently aren't ideal for them whatsoever. You know what I mean? Really not ideal for Daniel Santos. Tough debut to have. But I'm definitely going to side with him over Johnny Munoz. I like him over Johnny Munoz because I just don't see any talent in Johnny Munoz's game. And I think this is going to be a really high-paced, scrappy fight. And again, I don't see talent in Johnny Munoz Jr.'s game. Now, is there some strike and defense problems with Daniel Santos? There is, the same way there is with Oliveira. They have a very similar fight style, but he's talented. The way he throws shots, the way he pressures fighters, the way he cuts off the octagon, you can see that there's some skill there. And I know this is crazy to say about a UFC fighter who's 2-2 in the UFC and the bantamweight division as well. But I don't know, dude. I don't like this one. You know what I mean? I don't like this one for Johnny Munoz Jr. I think he's going to lose. Again, untalented. It's weird. I just don't see any part of his game that's like, oh, watch out. You know what I mean? He's just sort of like a well-rounded, stays composed in fights, and he's managed to beat Ludovic Shalinian and Jamie Simmons. And Ludovic Shalinian, pretty overrated guy. Like, Jack Shaw beat him with one arm and didn't get touched the entirety of that fight pretty much. You had 3 rounds against a one-armed Jack Shaw, and he couldn't even land clean shots on him. Like, he just pressures forwards, and if you're somewhat conscious in the brain, you can deal with that. But this guy lost to Nate Maness, lost to Tony Gravely, got really badly KO'd by Tony Gravely as well. This is Johnny Munoz Jr. I think I'm going to go with Daniel Santos. Coming off a win, got some momentum, had some time off. Was supposed to be fighting Johnny Munoz a month before. It's been rescheduled, so he's had a lot of time of notice. I think he gets this one done. And I think he's going to get it done by finish. Because if it goes to a decision, it's going to be close. But I'll lean towards Santos in the later rounds getting it done. But if there's a finish, it's definitely going to be Daniel Santos. So I'll go with him by TKO against the cage. We move on. Up the card, Andrei Arlovski versus Dontel Mays. This is one of those fights where you kind of just have to accept that this is one of the ones that Arlovski's going to win. You know what I mean? There's certain heavyweight fights where you're like, does Arlovski have this one? And that's how it is with Arlovski matchups. Like, there's a few unranked guys that he beats. There's a few that are dangerous matchups for him. And I think this is one of the guys that he beats because I've tried to believe in Dontel Mays. 31 years of age at heavyweight, 81 inches of reach, 6'6", probably 6'5", let's be real. But he's a big dude, rangy dude. He just got fucking wet blanketed by Augusto Sakai. Like, it was not a good performance from him. Like, he didn't get off anything on the feet. And even against Hamdi Abdul-Wahab, he was just so not good on the feet when he needed to be good. When you need to go in there and grit down and throw massive shots and start working the body and pressuring his opponent. He just seemed so hesitant on the feet. And I don't think Arlovski's going to be able to take him down. So I do think this is going to be a stand-up fight, but I think I can see Arlovski just sort of frustrating him at range. I can see him picking at him, tapping at his legs, landing little-ish blows on the chin throughout the fight, and just see Dontel Mays being gun-shy, on the back foot, hesitant to throw anything, and therefore doesn't throw enough to beat a guy like Andrei Arlovski. I could see an upset. There's always a chance of that with Arlovski, but I think Marcos Rodrigo de Lima was a good pick to beat Arlovski. I don't think it was like, oh, Arlovski's done again. Marcos Rodrigo de Lima beat him. Even though he did get hit by a phantom punch. I'm siding with him over Dontel Mays. This level of heavyweight, his skill can take over. We can move on. Up the card, John Castaneda versus Gafarov. Muin Gafarov. John Castaneda. Amazing matchup in the bantamweight division. Really looking forward to this one. I'm going to have to go with Gafarov over John Castaneda. Just because John Castaneda, although I think he's actually strangely talented for his record, 19-6, he's a young dude, and he is a talented fighter. You can't say he's not. Like, he looks good in fights quite often, but coming off a brutal KO loss, You know what I mean? Coming off a bad KO loss, and you're getting Gafarov, 18-4, 27 years of age. Gafarov got experience, and after losing to Angeliga on the Contender Series, split decision. And by the way, that fight was sort of decided by a big knockdown from Chad Angeliga. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like he got pieced up and just schooled by decision. Like, I believe there was a big knockdown that was landed by, what's his name? This isn't even showing up on the stats page. There was a big knockdown that was landed by, what's his name? I'm losing my mind again. What was his name? Angeliga in that fight. And it kind of changed the way the fight looked for the rest of it. You know what I mean? You just saw Gafarov not in the same stride as he was to start that fight. And outside of that, he's lost to John Lineker. And before that, hasn't lost since 2016. So he's had experience. He's fought at one championship. You know what I mean? He's fought on the Contender Series. He's fought at UAE Warriors. He's fought Lineker at one championship. So he's fought at a high level. And he's on a 2-fight win streak again. 2 finish streak in a row. One of them was a 15-1 Herbert Souza. So I'm going to have to go with him over John Castaneda here, who's coming off that KO loss. I'm going with Gafarov, even though he has taken this fight on reasonably-ish notice, but I still think he gets this one done over John Castaneda. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos versus Abubakar Nurmagomedov. This is, again, another risky prediction, but I'm going to go with Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I think it's the logical matchup here when you've got a guy like Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos that throws a lot of kicks on the back foot and likes a really slow-paced fight. I know he kind of put it on Benoit Saint-Denis, but that was because Benoit Saint-Denis was done from pretty early on in that fight, completely gassed out as the fight went on, started getting walked down, and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos just put an absolute whooping on him. But Elizeu hasn't fought since then. 36 years of age, hasn't fought since October of 2021. That's over a year and a half off here for him. And that's tough to see from an older fighter. Like, you start questioning, are you really in it to win it anymore? You know what I mean? Because at least Abubakar Nurmagomedov fought at the end of last year and beat Omar Gadziev in a grappling-based fight. There were some striking moments, of course, but it was really a battle of the grapplers there in those two, and he managed to get it done. Now, he has looked bad in other fights. He got triangled by David Zawada, and he went to a draw with Bojan Velikovic, of course, used to be in the UFC a long time ago. Not top-level competition, but not bad. So he has had some iffy performances, but I think if both of them show up on point, the grappling of Abubakar gets this one done. The pace pushing of Abubakar gets this one done. The pressure of him gets this one done. This is like a knockoff Khabib versus Edson Barboza, if you really think about the matchup. So I think the knockoff Khabib beats the knockoff Edson Barboza, if you ask me. We move on. Up the card, Guram Kutateladze versus Jamie Mullarkey. This is a great matchup. I really love this matchup. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. In my opinion, I know there are some good fights on this card. This is the main event for me. I've been waiting for Guram Kutateladze's comeback fight. And I think he does beat Jamie Mullarkey because if there's one thing I've noticed about Jamie Mullarkey's game, and by the way, although he's put together another win streak, he looked good in his last one, shut down an 11-0 undefeated guy, but that guy was a bit of a, I said this coming into the fight, he's a bit of a one-trick pony. Like, he'll go for a finish. He's a really good finisher early rounds, very athletic guy, but he kind of has like that style of go for the finish, and if it doesn't work out, it's risky for him. You know what I mean? Like, he's a bit of a one-trick guy. Like, he's only got that one thing to him, try and get a finish early on, and outside of that, I knew Mullarkey would sort of take over. So Mullarkey did look good in that fight, though. Very composed. But Michael Johnson arguably beat him. You know what I mean? Arguably beat this guy. And I don't think Guram Kutateladze would make it close with a Michael Johnson at this point. I know Michael Johnson is the type of guy to sleep Guram Kutateladze and then lose to Chase Hooper the weekend afterwards. But this is a guy who went to a split decision with Damir Ismagulov. Has a split decision win over Mateus Gamrot. And I rewatched that fight with him and Damir. It's such a high-level fight, man. Guram Kutateladze is top 15 UFC level. No denying that. Like, if they had him in the rankings, no one would be saying, what's he done to get ranked? You know what I mean? No one would be saying that because he deserves it. You can see it by the way he fights. Still young, 31 years of age, got a long time to be 31 as well, training out of the All-Stars gym. They're all sort of getting back into it now as well. They're all coming back at the same time. Chimaev's coming back soon as well. So I think Guram's going to get this one done. I think Guram's performances in his last two have shown that he's a different level to Mullarkey, in my opinion. And I think the body kicks are going to be really open on Mullarkey as well, because if you notice something that he does in his game, he keeps his guard up really, really high. And I think that's going to be a problem when he goes in there against Guram Kutateladze, who likes to go to the body with that nasty switch kick that he has. I think the body shots are going to be massive, and I think that's going to start opening up some shots high up on the feet after that. We move on to another fight on the card, which is Karine Silva versus Ketlen Souza. I'm going to go with Karine Silva over Ketlen Souza. Think another no-brainer of a pick here. I just think Karine Silva has a massive, massive finishing potential over Ketlen Souza. And also Karine Silva has experience being in the UFC at this point. You know what I'm saying? Ketlen Souza, young as well, prospect as well, on a win streak as well. Different types of win streaks. Decision against a 6-3. Decision against an 8-6. Decision against a 9-4. You know what I mean? Only finishing the people that are making their debuts that she's taken on. 22-3. And Karine Silva finished her in the first round. Poliana Botelho had been in the UFC. Gets finished in the first round. 4 first-round finishes in a row. When you see that in women's MMA, even the first one of that streak was against an 8-1 opponent as well, so when you see that in women's MMA, just consecutive finishes over and over again, like domination, finishing the fight, there's clearly a skill gap between her and her opponents, whereas decisions in women's MMA go either way on the day of the fight. So I'm definitely going to have to side with Karine Silva. If it's a decision, I think she wins anyway, but if there is going to be a finish from either one of them, it is going to be Karine Silva, and I'll pick her to get it done by submission as well. I reckon she'll get the back at some point, choke her out. So I'm going to go with Karine Silva getting this one done, hurting her on the feet first, and then going for a submission later on after hurting her. We move on. Tim Elliott versus Victor Altamirano. Tim Elliott's got to do this one. Do it for JP Bays. You know what I'm saying? He's got to stand up for what's happened to him. And I think if he wins and has a good post-fight speech about, yeah, fuck them hoes and all this type, who knows what he's going to say. She for the streets and popping off of all this type of stuff on the mic. Fuck Kevin Kroom, dude, all this. He needs to go off on the mic because he could have a bit of a fan rallying support around him after how he got done dirty. I think he wins the fight against Victor Altamirano. I like Victor Altamirano, but he's not technically good, and that's saying something for a flyweight. He's dangerous. He throws crazy shots. He'll find finishing moments because he does throw crazy stuff like knees up the middle, and he'll go for spinning attacks and big uppercuts off the lead hand and weird stuff that you don't see coming that gets finishes. But with him and Vinícius Salvador, both of them look exhausted in that fight at one point. And they just kept making mistakes against each other. And it was just like, it looked like a low-level fight. And at flyweight, even the guys making their debuts have high-level fights. So I don't think Vinícius Salvador is all that amazing. I really don't think he's all that good, to be honest with you. So I'm definitely going to be siding with Tim Elliott. Definitely Tim Elliott. Beat Tagir Ulanbekov. I know he cheated in some moments of that fight, but he has a win over Tagir Ulanbekov, who's good. You know, had a fight with Mateus Nicolau, lost pretty clearly in my opinion, but other than that, he's fought the best of the best, you know, like he's beat all the other opponents other than Brandon Royval, Askar Askarov, and Davison Figueiredo, Mateus Nicolau. That's like the top 5. Now, well, Askarov's gone, but if he was still there, that's like the top 5 of the flyweight division. And he has competitive decisions with some of them, so I'm definitely going to side with Tim Elliott here to outpoint Victor Altamirano and frustrate him to a decision win. I'm going to go over 29-28, Tim Elliott classic, 29-28 win. We move on. Up the card, Jim Miller versus Jared Gordon. I'm going with Jared Gordon. Although Jared Gordon just got KO'd, and it really does worry me. It does worry me that he just got KO'd. I do still think he's just a better fighter. Simply a better fighter than Jim Miller. And he was looking really good before Bobby Green headbutted him blatantly and KO'd him with a headbutt. Because that's what happened. You know what I mean? He was looking really good before then. Really, really good before then as well. Not just like... Because normally I don't think Jared Gordon's that good. I really don't think he's that good. But let's face it, in that fight, although the numbers say otherwise, the only one landing clean, good shots in round 1 before the head clash was Jared Gordon. He was catching Bobby Green on the chin quite a bit and making reads on him. And I think if you can make those reads on the striking game of Bobby Green, you can make the reads on Jim Miller, who, against Alexander Hernandez, just seemed to be missing a step. You know what I mean? He'd beaten some of the guys making their debut in the UFC that we found out weren't all that good, if you look back on it, now that we have some hindsight. Those prospects who were hyped up from the Contender Series, in hindsight, weren't the best in Nicholas Motta and Eric Gonzalez. They've both had a bit of a slide. And then he beat Donald Cerrone, but it's Donald Cerrone who hasn't at this point. And then Hernandez comes in and just sort of beats him in a 3-rounder. And he took that on short notice as well. So if it comes to pushing in the later rounds, I'm siding with Jared Gordon. You know what I mean? If it comes to really making that push in the later rounds of this fight and there isn't a quick finish in the first, I'm siding with Jared Gordon. And even if there's a finish, although he doesn't get finishes, I would side with him over Jim Miller. I just think Jim Miller's reached that age where you can see it on his body. He's not getting into the same level of shape anymore than he once was. I think he's losing a bit of that testosterone. And I think even though he got KO'd recently, Jim Miller also took a lot of damage recently as well. And I think that I'm going to go with Jared Gordon by decision win here. 30-27, 29-28. Who knows? I want to see him versus Pimlet again. We move on. Up the card, Alex Caceres versus Daniel Pineda. I'm going with Alex Caceres over Daniel Pineda. Caceres is very hard to finish because he's so elusive and tricky, and he makes tricky fights with everyone, Alex Caceres. One of the most underrated records, 20-13 is his record, but when you look at the people that he's lost to, the Kron Gracie one, tough break, got taken down immediately, fell into the center of the octagon with Kron Gracie on his back. Terrible. You know what I mean? Can't have gone worse for him. Since that, won 5 in a row. You know what I mean? 5 in a row. Great wins as well. Had finishes throughout those wins too. Then he fought Sadiq Youssef. Really close fight with Sadiq Youssef. Super close fight. Sadiq Youssef got it done. He edged 2 of the rounds, I believe. Round 2 and round 3. Was landing a bunch of really good leg kicks. Daniel Pineda does have some good leg kicks, but I think Caceres gets this one done. Just KO'd Julian Erosa. Finished him badly. Turning back around off some momentum now as well. Got a bonus for that, so he's chasing bonuses. Pineda does really well at finishing people. Caceres does really well at not getting finished. You know what I mean? He just doesn't get finished. I'm going to side with Caceres if this goes to a decision. I don't see a finish taking place because of how elusive Caceres is. But Pineda could be the one to do it because he does always get a finish, to be fair. But Caceres will make it a bit too tricky for him on the feet, I think. And he'll start to slow down as the fight goes on because he always has rough weight cuts. We move on to the main event. Kai Kara France. I've got Caceres, by the way. Kai Kara France versus Amir Albazi. Got to side with Kai Kara France. Got to side with Kai Kara France. The odds are close. The odds are close. And people are picking this fight very closely as well. We're seeing 54% to Kai Kara France and 46% to Amir Albazi. So, very close fight. Very competitive. The way I see it is this. Amir Albazi does well on the feet. He does very well on the feet when he goes first. You know what I'm saying? We saw that against Alessandro Costa. I mean, he did have some good counter moments in that fight, but he pieces up together. When he goes first, he can set up a nice little combo, and he managed to drop his man twice in that fight, eventually finishing him in the 3rd round. Outside of that, he likes to take people down and get the back. Kai Kara France, I think, although he's good offensively, and we've seen that against guys like Cody Garbrandt, who, you know, his chin's a bit spent, but we've seen it against a lot of opponents. Kara France can come forward, and he can do well, and he was doing well against Brandon Moreno as well in his very last fight. He's very good defensively, though. Doesn't get hit clean a lot on the chin. Not at all. I don't see Albazi throwing a body kick. He's going to be trying to land punches on Kai Kara France. And Kara France doesn't get hit clean. You barely see him rocked or dropped. Roy Val had to hit him with some spinning crazy stuff and then almost an illegal knee to drop him and eventually finish him with a guillotine. He's got a good chin, Kara France. Good patience. Knows how to not get finished. And I think he's going to have the experience advantage if this does go 5 rounds as well. Although he hasn't been 5 rounds many times himself, I still think the experience that he's had going 3 rounds in important fights and being in that interim title fight bout with Brandon Moreno anyway, I think he's still going to have a massive experience advantage here having his first main event. He'll adjust better to the all of a sudden 5 rounds that he's going compared to Amir Albazi, I think. Much more experience, still young, great gym, 30 years of age. I think he beats Amir Albazi. And also, when you talk about what's the best part of Kai Kara-France's game, what style does Kai Kara-France typically beat? People that are trying to take him down. They try and take him down, they try and ground him, and he just sort of like toughs his way out of it and stays patient, doesn't let them get the back. If they get the back, he doesn't let them get the choke. He fights his way off of the back. And then Rodrigo Bontorin tried that on him, got slept at the end of the first round. Had his back for a bit, but Kara-France stayed calm, stayed patient, defended, got him off of him, and slept him at the end of the first round. Askarov tried to take him down, had a great first round, but Kara-France stays alive, stuffs the takedowns that he needs to. We start to see Askarov slow down, and this is in 3-rounders where Kara-France can stuff a bunch of early damage and stuff a bunch of early attempts and start wearing guys down in the second and third. I think if it's 5 rounds, Albazi's a finisher, and I think he's going to go for the finish, and I don't see him getting it. I don't see him getting the finish. I think Albazi could look for a KO. Don't think he gets it. Could look to get the back. Don't think he gets it. Don't think he gets takedowns. He might win a round or 2 by trying that and putting together a bunch of takedown attempts. He is a good upcoming fighter, but I'm still going to go with Kai Kara-France. Great takedown defense. Great survivability in dangerous situations. Good striking. Very patient on the feet as well. I could see him taking over as the fight goes on and maybe getting a 4th round TKO over Amir Albazi, who's been propelled to the top quite quick. And at flyweight, when people get jumped to the top quite quick, they tend to take a loss or 2 and then have to rebuild themselves. It even happened to Figueiredo. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. I've got Kara-France, 4th round finish. Goodbye.